On today's episode of Locked On Wild, Brock Faber just got the bag.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome in to another episode of Locked On Wild. We are your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. We are your team every day. And we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. With the playoffs in the rearview mirror, the sports just aren't sporting the way we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There is something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On today's emergency episode of Locked On Wild, Brock Faber just inked an 8-year extension with the Minnesota Wild. We'll talk about all the particulars and why this is going to look like a bargain 2 years or less from now. We'll also talk about what this means for the rest of the Wild decor over the next couple of seasons. My name is Seth Topal, your daily Minnesota Wild insider. And as mentioned, hot off the press, Brock Faber signing an 8-year extension worth $68 million in total. It comes down to an $8.5 million AAV, and there are some other particulars with this as well. Faber getting some trade protection, a no-move clause, and a 15-team no-trade list after the 5th year of the deal because everybody else got one. Why not Brock Faber? All kidding aside, of anybody that deserves one, it's Faber that certainly does for his deal. But as the Minnesota Wilds point out in the release, the number of different things that Faber did in his first year in the NHL is just unbelievably impressive. As the team mentions, Faber, who is 21, recorded 47 points, 8 goals, 39 assists, 28 penalty minutes, and 150 blocked shots in 24 minutes, 58 seconds of time on ice per game, while playing in all 82 games as a rookie in 2023-2024. The 6'1" native of Maple Grove, Minnesota, led all NHL rookies in time on ice, was 6th overall amongst NHL skaters. Also led rookies in blocked shots, ranked tied first in assists, tied second in points, and third with 13 power play assists. Faber was named NHL Rookie of the Month in January after posting 13 points in 14 games, including a 6-game point streak from January 15th through the 25th, which marked the longest point streak by a rookie defenseman in franchise history. Faber finished the season with 2,047 minutes, 53 seconds of time on ice, the most by an NHL rookie since the 2000-2001 season, and the 5th highest total among all NHL players last season. He skated a career-high 33 minutes, 25 seconds in time on ice against Montreal on December 21st, the highest single-game total by an NHL skater last season, and 3rd highest total by an NHL rookie since the 2000-2001 season. He set single-season rookie franchise records for most assists, most blocked shots, and time on ice. Faber's point total was also the most all-time by a rookie Wild defenseman and the 2nd highest total by a rookie in franchise history behind Kirill Kaprizov, who had 51 points. Faber finished 2nd in the voting for the 2023-2024 Calder Memorial Trophy and was named to the 2023-2024 NHL All-Rookie team, becoming one of 4 players in franchise history to receive the honor. Jonas Brodin in 2012-2013, Kirill Kaprizov in 2020, 2021, and Marco Rossi, who was also named in 2023, 2024. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Those are just the accolades that Faber put together this past season. We know about how decorated of a performer he was with the Gophers. And this is going to help present my case as to why this contract is going to be an absolute bargain in the next couple of seasons. Because let's think about all the other variables that make Faber's performance even that much more impressive. We found out after the season was done that Faber played the final 2 months of the season with broken ribs, which explains why there was a bit of a drop in his defensive metrics, but makes it that much more impressive because he's willing to do whatever it takes to win games. Whatever it takes for him to help his team, he is willing to do it, no questions asked. Not only that, but we also saw him fill as many different roles as the Minnesota Wild needed filling this past season. Injuries to Jonas, Brodin, and Jared Spurgeon. Brock Faber became a top pairing defender for the Minnesota Wild this season. Brock Faber learned how to play the power play for the first time after having really not done that with the Gophers. He stepped in on the top power play and it didn't miss a beat. And the best part about all of this, from a Brock Faber perspective, he did all of this as a rookie. He did all of this as a first-year player in the NHL. Now, yes, he did get the cup of tea last year down the stretch and in the postseason against the Dallas Stars, and we even got a taste of it then. That play that he made where he fully dove and got his stick just enough on a Dallas shot to deflect it from going into the net. We saw from that moment a guy that is willing to do whatever it takes. And those are the types of players, as we continue to talk about who should be built around for this Minnesota Wild franchise going forward. And make no mistake about it, in a short amount of time, Brock Faber has cemented himself firmly in the mix of players that are essential to the success of this team. Think about where the Minnesota Wild would have been at this past season if Brock Faber didn't do everything that he did to help out in a variety of spots. If he doesn't have even 80% of the season he had this past year, the Minnesota Wild aren't even close to a playoff spot and are likely picking in the top 10. He was that good, and his play on the ice was that important to the Minnesota Wilds to even get them to where they finished the year at. But I think one of the things that is most impressive about what Brock Faber brings, not even taking into account what he does on the ice, is his demeanor off it. He oozes captain material for this Minnesota Wild franchise. He is somebody who is always accountable, no matter if he scores the game-winning goal or is responsible for giving up the game-winning goal on the other side of the ice. He is accountable after games, answered every question regularly that reporters had to ask, no matter if the team got beat 7-1 or if they shut out the opponent 2-0. He is somebody who understands what accountability means and why it's important to be accountable for your performance and to show that to the different players on the team. So not only is it the on-ice performance for Brock Faber that makes this deal a good one for Minnesota, it's his demeanor and performance off of it too. And let's keep this in mind as well. Let's factor this into the equation as well. The same metrics that we use to track Matt Boldy's performance as performing above his AAV already in the early part of his contract extension, Brock Faber this past year as a rookie played at a $7.5 million AAV level. Think about that before this deal even starts. As a rookie, Brock Faber provided approximately $7.5 million of value to this Minnesota Wild team. And so you're talking about a guy, as his defense continues to be great, as his offense improves over these next few seasons, he may not get to Cale Makar level production, but you could argue he is every bit as important as any of the top defensemen, the top young defensemen in this league. You just, every example you can point to as a guy who is just as important to their team as Faber is to this one. So all told, $8.5 million is below what we kind of anticipated. Figured it would be right about 9, 8.5, and somebody who now you don't have to, you put in the lineup, set it and forget it, and just fun to watch. Like, on top of all this, just fun to watch out there doing his thing because he loves to play the game and that enthusiasm shines through. But he's a fierce competitor too. Make no mistake. As much as he enjoys to be out there and to play, he's a fierce competitor that wants to win. And having that mentality on your team, and more importantly, doing whatever it takes to win, those are the kinds of players that you want to build around. Now, this has become a pretty commonplace occurrence for the Minnesota Wild, is to lock in young players for long contracts and trust that while it may be that they either are slightly below or meet the AAV in terms of production, that on the back end, you are going to be setting yourself up for some really good savings. And so we'll take a look at 2 instances in which the Minnesota Wilds have done similar things with their young players and how those contracts have turned out as well. That is as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Folks, you know me. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want any of my favorite teams to stop playing. But with the NHL and the NBA seasons already wound down, with the NFL coming up, the Olympics going on in Paris right now, there are good options for your sports viewing pleasure, but it just isn't like it is during the winter. FanDuel is here to help, though. They can help keep the sports going whenever you want. All you have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime you are in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There is something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to hang out after today's episode is done so you don't miss out on all of the great Minnesota sports content 24/7 at Locked On Sports Minnesota, the first of its kind 24/7 streaming channel. All of your favorite Locked On shows, all your favorite Locked On personalities, talking about your favorite teams, your favorite players, your favorite sports. And best of all, it never gets above conversational level. I was just listening to a radio station when I was out and about the other day, and their 2 hosts, they were trying to yell over each other to make a simple point. It's like, we don't need that. Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Minnesota can offer you a 24/7 streaming option that'll give you all your favorite teams and shows without any of the yelling. So make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today, available on YouTube or the Amazon Fire TV channels app. Continuing to react to the big news of the day, Brock Faber signing an 8-year extension, $8.5 million AAV. And Faber will be in Minnesota for a very, very long time. There's trade protection involved, but when it's Faber, honestly, those are the players that should be getting the trade protection. I want to look at a couple of instances in which the Minnesota Wild have done this exact sort of contract. Now, if you look at, let's start with Jonas Brodin. Back in 2015, Brodin was 21 years old. He was a restricted free agent. Minnesota Wild signed him to a 6-year deal worth $25 million. Now, that was almost 10 years ago. And obviously, things have, the salary cap has gone up since. But for Brodin, his cap hit was 4.16 as a 21-year-old during the course of that deal. Once that deal was done, Brodin signed a 7-year, $42 million extension that'll run through 2027, 2028, which upped his value to $6 million. Safe to say that Jonas Brodin has worked out pretty darn good for the Minnesota Wild. We talked about him on Sunday. We've talked about him quite a bit throughout the course of, well, his entire Wild career. One of the premier pursuit defensemen in the NHL and capable of turning Connor McDavid into some guy on the ice. And so that contract has worked out quite well. Brodin has had no trouble hitting that level of production to where that contract is well worth it for the Minnesota Wild. Maybe the best example on that same vein is the contract that Joel Eriksson Ek signed as a 24-year-old, an 8-year, $42 million contract for Brodin that also runs through the 2028-2029 season. And for Eriksson Ek, he just continues to get better and better, continues to add to his arsenal, and has turned now into the top center on this Minnesota Wild team. Not out of necessity. He's done it because he's earned it. He has earned the ability to be the best center on this team and has treated the Wild to just amazing seasons over the last few years, to where now you look at him making $5.25 million per year as a bargain. What he is offering to this Minnesota Wild team, now a 30-goal scorer, a premier defensive center, a great face-off center. He's the power play net front guy. He's on the penalty kill. He just is so integral to what this team is doing. But again, I stress, it's not out of necessity. It is because he is good enough to be able to do it. And so that contract looks like a bargain for Joel Eriksson Ek, who's playing closer to an $8 or $9 million AAV type of player. Matt Boldy, same thing. $7 million per year, a 7-year, $49 million contract that he signed as a 22-year-old. And had 30 goals a season ago, had 29 goals this year. The first year of his extension, by the way, the first year the extension officially kicked in, he had 69 points in 75 games, including 29 goals and 40 assists. Boldy helped turn Kirill Kaprizov and Joel Eriksson Ek into one of the most dominant lines in the NHL this past season. He is already meeting the AAV for his current contract. And as a 22, 23-year-old, there is high probability that he is going to exceed that value over the final few years of the deal. And Jared Spurgeon as well. Spurgeon signing a longer deal back when he was still a younger player. And look at how that has worked as well. So the Minnesota Wild have a history of making these types of contracts to bet on a player. And yeah, you might pay a little more on the front end, but you're going to be getting a bargain by the time the deal is done. Because now, keep this in mind as well, we're to the point now where the salary cap is going to continue to steadily increase for the Minnesota Wild. And every time one of these young defensemen signs a new deal, you're resetting the market. And, you know, the one that I think was most commonly used as a comparison point for the Brock Faber extension was what the Ottawa Senators gave to Jake Sanderson. Sanderson signing a deal that pays him just over $8 million per season in an 8-year, $64.4 million contract. If Jake Sanderson can get $64.4 million, Brock Faber getting 68 is a bargain. And, you know, I know Sanderson had 10 goals, but Faber's got him in points, time on ice, every metric. So again, this is the going rate. This is the going rate for a defenseman who does everything. And the Wild got it done before somebody else stepped in and drove the price up even further. So is it a lot considering what is already on the board for the Minnesota Wild decor? Sure. But 2-3 years from now, he's going to be playing at a rate of a $10 million per year defenseman. And that is when you really notice the savings. So this is nothing new for the Minnesota Wild. They continue to try to retain young talent and get real bargains as the deal unfolds. And I don't think Brock Faber is any exception. I think the Wild are going to get the same thing as this deal plays out. We will finish today's show by discussing the current state of the Wild decor and what Faber's extension could mean for a couple of long-time regulars. We'll talk about that as we finish today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. One final segment of today's episode of Locked on Wild. And once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day, or in today's case, episode number 3 for the day. But when news strikes, Locked on Wild has you covered with instant reaction to everything going on. And today is no exception. Brock Faber, 8-year extension, $8.5 million AAV. I want to take a look at where the current state of the decor is at. So let's move to next year, because you've got Brock Faber now in at $8.5 million per year. You've already got Jared Spurgeon at $7.575. You've got Jonas Brodin at $6 million. You've got Jake Middleton at $4.35 million. And you also have Zach Bogosian at $1.25 million as your current decor. Declan Chisholm will be an unrestricted free agent, could potentially re-sign with the team, but I kind of wonder, and we've talked about this throughout the offseason and during the season last year as well. I'm just wondering what the exit strategy is for Jared Spurgeon / Jonas Brodin. They're not going to play forever. And Spurgeon especially is getting up there in age. He's 35 now. Jonas Brodin is 31. And it is very clear that the passing of the baton will be from Jared Spurgeon and Jonas Brodin to Brock Faber and Zeev Buium, who we will, again, I would bet on it that we'll see Buium before the season is done, depending on how things go with the Denver season this year. But it's very clear that the handing of the baton will be happening here before too long. And just from a money standpoint, too, $13.5 million between Spurgeon and Brodin. Another 4.35, actually just make it 6 between Zach Bogosian and Jake Middleton. So that's $19.5 million between those four. Then you add in 8.5 for Brock Faber. And all of a sudden you're looking at $28 million for a group of 5 defensemen, which would put you up over 25% of your salary cap. And if you look at the D situations for several other big teams, Dallas Stars, they are currently at $23.5 million for their decor, which is 26% of the cap. Colorado Avalanche, they come in and their defense is at $28.225 million, which is 32% of their salary cap. Let's take a look at the Winnipeg Jets and see how dispersed their salary cap situation is for their defense. They're at $21.175 million, which is 24% of the cap. But as much money as you throw in to your defense, that is less money available for you to really maximize things offensively. But here's, to devil's advocate, my own point. This is where entry-level contracts become vital, because just looking at, let's look at Nashville too. They're at 30.7% of the cap with $27 million allocated to their defense. So for the Minnesota Wild, the big challenge for them next year and beyond is going to be to replace particular players that come off the books with players that are on entry-level contracts and therefore can provide a little relief, assuming that you don't make a move defensively, which I think is now something that probably has to enter into the equation. I think that's something that needs to be on the table now, because if you get above about 25% of cap allocations to your defense, that gets tough to figure out offensively. Marcus Johansson will be an unrestricted free agent after this season. His spot is essentially spoken for by Danila Yurov. So there is where you are adding in an entry level to fill there. And you've got Kirill Kaprizov, who will be an unrestricted free agent after the 2025-2026 season. He is going to be looking for a new deal. His will be double digits. I can promise you that. But then this is where the focus needs to be, once prospects are ready, some of these entrenched veterans are going to have to be moved. It's not a question of want to, it's a question of have to. Because if you're going to continue to keep Jared Spurgeon, Jonas Brodin, Brock Faber, and Jake Middleton, if you're going to keep all four of those guys, you have to find ways to make up for it elsewhere throughout the roster. And you are getting, you're getting a little bit of relief coming off the books. And actually now they have, Puckpedia has, as I speak, factored in Brock Faber's deal to post or to future seasons. So now I can tell you that the Minnesota Wild already have $27.675 million allocated to their defense next year. And again, it is not something, it's not something that Bill Guerin is going to have the option to be able to do. It's something that he's going to have to do. Already accounted for next year, and this is before any sort of increase in cap space. The Minnesota Wild have $72.9 million of cap room already spoken for out of a possible $88 million. Now, let's say it goes up by 4. Now, all of a sudden, you are right around 20, but you got 15 players signed out of a possible 23. And so you've got $20 million to allocate to 8 players, which again, math is that's about $2 million per year or per player. So you do have some room to do a few things, but as we've mentioned before, there are more players in line that are going to need to get potential extensions. Marco Rossi, Jesper Wallstedt. These guys are going to be getting some sort of an extension next season, if not sometime during this one. So those numbers are going to be factored in as well. And to continue to get out of this cycle that just continues to happen, that's where those ELCs come in. And so I'm telling you right now, whether Bill Guerin likes it or not, that time is coming that he's going to have to make a decision on some of these guys. One of these guys, one of the contracts. You're just going to have to make a decision and do something you're probably not going to want to do. But that's what being a GM entails, is making tough decisions you don't always want to make for the betterment of the team. And so this just creates another interesting wrinkle to keep an eye on for this team, because anytime you're above about 25% in cap allocations on your defense, that's about the magic line. And so we'll see how it plays out. But the overall takeaway from today, this is a great day for Brock Faber and his agents, because he's locked in long-term, 8-year deal, $8.5 million AAV. And Brock Faber is worth every penny. Brock Faber is, as a rookie, better than many other defensemen throughout the league. One of probably the top, I don't know, I'm not going to do rankings, but he's in the top, single percentile in defensemen around the league. And he's going to turn this into an absolute bargain. And I cannot wait to see him do this over the next few years. So thank you for everybody tuning in for now episode 3 for today. But like I said, anytime breaking news drops, I pride myself in being the one that you hear it from on these podcast airwaves. And so glad to be with you here for 3 episodes today. We'll continue to talk about the fallout from this. And it's not even, I don't use fallout as a negative word, but the ripple effect is probably a better way to put it. We'll continue to look at the ripple effect from Faber's deal and what it means for others who are next up in line for this Minnesota Wild team. So stay tuned for that here throughout the rest of the week. Make sure before you go, you hit that like button so you don't miss out on any new episodes here on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button as well, so as soon as an episode drops, you'll know about it. And we'll continue to keep you up to date here throughout the rest of the offseason. You can find new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.